Welcome to Carefree and Conscious, paranormal and profound authors with stunning true stories. If you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Susanne Wilson, the Carefree Medium and Intuition Educator. Today on Carefree and Conscious, Letters to and from the Other Side with Claudia Milligan. Claudia describes herself as having been a nice, logical, rational person, very left brain, until her son David passed at the age of 29. She says she decided she wasn't ready to let him go and wasn't ready to go where he went. So she accepted his telepathic invitation to keep in contact. Thus began a series of writing letters back and forth with her son in spirit. Her book, Letters to David, Following My Son into Spirit, tells us how this relationship continued to unfold between mother and son. You'll also hear about Claudia's relationship with the wonderful healer, Mr. Harry Edwards, whom she met after he passed. And now, Carefree and Conscious, Letters to and from the Other Side. Claudia Milligan, welcome to Carefree and Conscious.
Hey, thank you, Susanne. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. I want to jump right into your son, David, and how from the other side of life, he has changed your life and your evolutionary process, of course, as a channel and a medium. Could you first talk to us a little bit about what your son, David, was like?
Oh, first of all, he was the first person in my life that I was able to love as they were. I held him in my arms the very first time, and it was the first time I didn't look at somebody and go, he'd be okay if. And I saw him looking at me, and for the first time, I knew I was okay by him too. So that changed my life right there. And I recognized that just like I knew you were wanting me to be a little bit this or that, I also recognized that I was doing the same to you. I didn't realize that, you know? So I think one of the big life lessons that David is teaching me and everybody else, I want to be able to accept people as they are and decide what I'm going to do about it, you know?
Accept people as they are. Okay. Yeah. So the book title, Letters to David, Following My Son into Spirit. Could you tell us why you titled the book that way? What does it mean?
Well, David titled it, he wanted me to call it Conversations with David. And ever the English major, you know, no conversations just back and forth. It's letters. I mean, you know, that's what the book's going to be about. So, all right. So it's Letters to David, and I wrote to him. Letters to David, I have this subtitle. What do you think? No. And he gave me a couple ideas, and one of them was Following My Son into Spirit, which I loved.
Now he was 29 when he transitioned out of the physical world and fully into spirit. Did you ever have a feeling that something was going to happen with him?
I pretty much knew he passed in March, and in January of that year, I went to a therapist, and she says, "Oh, what brings you here?" And I said, "I know my son's not going to survive this run, and I'm going to need help." He was using alcohol and drugs. Today, I don't think there was anything wrong with him. I just think he didn't quite belong here, you know?
Can you talk a little bit about that feeling of like you're not quite from here or there's something different? Do you think there was a foreshadowing that he would have an earlier exit point from Earth than you thought? Or did you see something in you and something in him that was different? What are some of the things that caught your attention?
Well, I can be a little oblivious. So one of the biggest hints that he gave me was, Mom, can I have my birthday money early? Your birthday was a month ago. Well, I know, but I don't think I'm going to make it until my next birthday. So if I do, I'll give you my money back. Things like that.
Wow, wow. And just to be clear, he's not ill. Is that correct?
He was not ill. No, I know he suffered from some depression or who knows, maybe mental illness, maybe not. Like I said, I don't know. But he wasn't suited for Earth. He says something in his letters about, yeah, you got people shooting at each other there. I don't think that's a great place to be.
And a lot of the things, and just for people they're not familiar with the book, the letters are a way that where you're doing what I am just like on earth to get people to do, which is to continue the relationship once our loved one has left the physical body. But these letters in this book, they're a two-way communication, aren't they? Can you talk about how that works?
I can just tell you what I do and what I've helped other parents, especially because I think with parents, the connection is even that much closer. And the scientists say now that moms hold their kids' DNA in their bodies for decades. But I just would write, hey, David, it's a lousy day today. It's raining, and I was going to go to the park, and it all stinks. I love you, Mom, dear Mom. And words would just come up. Some people call it automatic writing. I don't like a lot of the words we use in mediumship because everybody seems to know what they mean and know, oh no, if it's automatic writing, then your handwriting is different, or it's not really automatic writing. And I don't have patience for that.
Yeah, and that hasn't been my finding anyway about automatic writing. There's this, and I think that you're leading us directly into trance. There's this continuum of mental mediumship, from mental mediumship, channeling, evidential mediumship, light trance, deep trance, full trance, physical mediumship. You have been traveling along a continuum now. How did you get into trance?
When well, first I started out as a bean counter. I was an English major after, a month of being in accounting. And I walked out of Miss Lucille Rapp's class because it was boring and it was 8 a.m. And I became an English major. But I found out that accountants make more money. So I spent 25 years in accounting, and then my son passed and I wasn't letting him go. He was not getting away from me that easy. So I started studying mediumship, and early on, the communicators would say to me, oh, just let me talk. I thought they didn't like my mediumship. And I would talk to teachers, not you. You wouldn't have told me this, but they would say, no, it's not how you do it, because God forbid, in England, they say there's no such thing as channeling. What's your definition of channeling? There's no such thing. And in America, I don't know. It's just, again, I get hung up on the definitions. So when I found out they wanted to talk, and they did, and they brought through evidence, your son had a whole lot of hair on his chest. Because when they come in, I can feel something usually. And she started laughing, and she said, yeah, and his dad did too, and he couldn't stand his dad, so he used to shave his chest.
Oh, so that's great evidence because it was a thing. It was a real thing in the family that was discussed. It's really cool. Yeah, there's the traditional British evidential mediumship is following a set of rules
and they do have dogma because it is a church, it is a religion, and it's a really great basis, and it's just good stuff. But there are so many ways to connect with loved ones in spirit, whether you're doing it for yourself or you're the medium for someone else. What do you think David thinks of you teaching people how to make their own connection, and is he involved in the process?
He's involved in everything. And I still get a lot of readings just because I do a lot of practice and circles and things like that. And a few months ago, a medium brought him through, and he said to me, I am having the best time of my life. I love working with you. So he's always in there. I think he hands out my business cards in spirit.
I like that. I like that a lot. I met you 7 or 8 years ago. You were in one of my weekend workshops, and I can remember you sitting there during an exercise and channeling something from David and read it to us. And I think to a person in that group, felt it in the heart chakra. It's like he sort of tunes into the frequency where you are and gives a gift, gives a blessing or something like this. So do you think that when people read the letters, do you think they're receiving some kind of transmission? I mean, am I just way off here, or is there something more than words in going on?
It's almost creepy, and I like the word creepy, but I've had one mom who wrote a review about her son who is not in spirit, but they're estranged because he deals with mental illness, a bunch of things. But as she was reading that book, she connected soul to soul with her son, and there was nothing in the way. And dads have reported that as they're reading the book, they can hear their kids' voices, non, other relationships, spouses, whatever, close ones. They'll hear their kids, or they'll feel their spouse, or they'll feel the touch of somebody while they're reading the book. So David did not, it wasn't me and David that wrote that book. I feel bad just having the two of our names on the cover because it feels like there was a whole crowd.
You know what? I didn't even know that you were getting that kind of feedback. I just remember it's like one of the indelible memories of that weekend of how we felt it. And I knew that there was going to be more to come, but I'm not surprised because I know from working with parents who have children on the other side of life that they plan things on the other side. They plan ways to get through to us. They meet each other, and it's like they talk about their parents meeting up here, but this isn't just for people who have a child on the other side. It's anybody who wants to connect, but we're also talking about connecting with higher consciousness in
Yes.
general. So what do you say to someone that says, I just want to start, but I'm totally scared of failure. I'm afraid if I sit down and I want to channel something or receive a few words or whatever, nothing will happen. It'll just be going to be one more disappointment. What do you encourage people to try in the very beginning?
I just ask them if maybe they fear not being connected to their loved one, and which fear is greater. A friend of mine, I gave her a call when I took my car to the car wash decades ago, and a couple days later I realized that it had no antenna anymore. But there's a big sign on the car wash: "We are not responsible for." And I said, "So there's nothing I can do?" And she said, "Let them say no." And I realized that I had been saying no my whole life to myself by not asking. And so all those people if we love someone in spirit, why would they not want to connect with us at least as much as we want to connect with them? And so when we don't even try, we're saying no to ourselves. Let them say no.
Yeah, it's like if you don't try, it's one of those, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And what do you say to people who, okay, I wrote down a few words. I think it's my loved one, but I don't know. How do I know this is real and not confabulation?
I didn't know for a year. I was writing every single morning. Okay, David, I missed a couple days. But one morning, the evidence just started piling up like it does, right? And all of a sudden, I pushed my chair away from my desk and I said, "Son of a gun, this is you, isn't it?" And after that moment, I never unknew. Just like you know you're a medium. And once you know you're a medium, you can doubt it, but you always really know.
It's like you attune to this frequency, and after that, when you're on it and when you're off of
Yeah.
it. Like, it's kind of like when, I have a real quick process to tune in because I've done it for so many years. But if I don't do my process to tune out and I go to the grocery store, it's like I'm seeing all these auras. I'm starting to pick up people's moods, and I'm like, oh, shoot. It's not so much like I have to protect myself, like, oh my gosh, I do a grounding and protection, mostly, to not take on other living people's energies. It's more like an openness. Like it's like you're tuning into on a radio station or
Yeah.
something like that. Is it easier for just anybody in your experience to tune into their own loved one's frequency? Is that easier than then tuning into another person's loved one's frequency? And what's the difference?
You asked me, so I'm going to say it's night and day easier to tune in to somebody I love because the connection is there. But a lot of mediums will say, no, I cannot connect with my child in spirit. Great mediums. I cannot, because I always second guess myself because, you can't validate. Oh, yeah, I knew that. I knew that. I knew that. Right. That's just stupid. Sorry, but it is.
Yeah, and I'll speak for myself. I have a relative, an uncle, and I think I just put on social media the other day that I finally heard from him. I hadn't heard from him since a month after he passed over 5 years ago, just a little over 5 years ago. And he came in, I was doing a prayer all alone, and he came in and commented something about my prayer. And I'm like, oh, you're here. And it was right. It was just, I wasn't sitting and asking, it's just very spur of the moment. And I'm like, it's up to them. And we didn't talk every day anyway when he was here in the physical. He's an uncle, not my child. Do you think that the type of relationship that you had when they were here in the physical has influence on being able to channel words from them onto paper?
Let me show you something I've been doing for a long time, but especially since last August. That says RDPJ for Random Dead People Journal.
Okay, so for listeners, and we have way more listeners than watchers on YouTube, which I hope that changes. But she just held up a really good looking journal. And tell us again what that acronym stands for.
RDPJ stands for Random Dead People Journal because
Okay.
I had been doing some writing, like recovery writing, like I would write to God. Dear God, how you doing? Love, Claudia. Dear Claudia, doing just great, thanks. Everything's good. Or whatever. And like with David, I recognized that whether it was real or not, it made me feel better.
Okay. Now we're getting into this use of imagination as a tool rather than it's the enemy. people say, was it just my imagination? The imaginal world is where a lot of our intuitive senses come from. When I see clairvoyantly, I mostly see subjectively clairvoyantly, meaning it's in my mind's eye, not like the person's in the room, which would be very startling. So how, tell me what you say to someone. They work with you, they're learning how to be an open channel. What do you tell them when they say they can't prove this?
Maybe don't go into science.
Ah, yeah, it's not a scientific controlled, but it can be replicated, and that's part of the scientific process.
Right.
Right?
But and I know that they're making headway, but I also know it's awfully slow, because I mean, the basis of science for me anyway is, let's prove it. Let's show that it happens under these circumstances on these days. And if I was spirit, I would get irritated by that.
Why?
I think of the spiritualist church. God bless you. Glad you're there. But this is the way you're going to show up. Don't be talking through mediums. Give us evidence. We don't want messages. Messages are not important. Do it like this and don't do it like that. And be over here and don't charge more than this. And
Okay.
spirit's
Yeah.
like, I don't do rules.
I'm totally with you about the rules. Yes, and having gone to a college in the UK and seeing several demonstrations, it's name, rank, and serial number. You identify them, and it's just like, okay, I knew all of that, but what did they come here to say? So I've taught my students, and the way I work is identification, evidence, message, IEM, identify their relationship to the sitter, the evidence that it's really them,
No.
and the specific things, and then what did they come here to say today, which may or may not match what the sitter expected. And so the message part is left out, and the evidence is not very creative in the spiritualism. It could be, Bob Smith is here, and here was his address. Okay, so I know there's an afterlife, but it's important work and it's foundational. It's just not changing. It's not evolving. Although there are people within, and I'm not talking about a specific place, I'm talking about the religion of spiritualism. There are people within spiritualism, though, who want it to evolve and want it to grow and want it to change, or at least not look down on the rest of us. And there needs to be a happy medium among the mediumship.
A happy medium.
Right. Where we don't just have the mediums go to a weekend workshop, put up a website and say, I'm an evidential medium, but we also want them to be able to give more information from the soul than what traditional spiritualism says. Also, in the UK, their wages are much lower than our wages here. So when they say you can't charge more than £200, which is like, what, $250 or something to us, their wages are lower because they have their healthcare is taken care of, and lots of things are already paid for them, and their wages are lower because their prices are lower also. So that $250 max, that seems to be a some kind of line in the sand. I don't know if that it's codified anywhere. It's probably more like $450 here. And so, I always tell this my students, you charge what you need to make your living, and if you're doing a good job, people will pay it. And that's that. We all give lots of stuff away. We all give free readings. We all speak at groups. We all do all kinds of things. But I've had certain people say, well, you're not spiritual if you're charging X. What are you comparing it to?
Well,
Where their cost of living is half of ours.
At least they're not being judgmental, because that would really block out spirit.
Well, and I think you're an important force right now to show that we have to think bigger and empower more people to experiment with their connection. If it's helpful, hopeful, and healing, do you feel like the pen and the paper is a great way to start, or are there other ways, or what do you tell people to do?
Now I tell them what I did. 3 years ago, I needed a new computer, and my guides. I know that some people say guides will not tell you what to do, but my guides didn't read that handbook. So they said, get a Mac. I'm like, I don't want to get a Mac. I like Microsoft. Get a Mac. So I thought I'd better get a Mac because I'm a little scared of them, So I got a Mac. And what I learned was the dictation system on the Mac is phenomenal, much better than any app. And I don't have to correct it all. So I sit in the morning, I meditate, I talk to my sort of conglomeration of guides. I speak, my Mac dictates it. And when my guides speak, I speak it out loud, and there it is. That's how that's how I dictated letters to David anyway. A lot of the letters were in journals, but.
It's also called inspired address. I can remember in my very first development circle I sat in when I was pretty new, there would be somebody assigned to inspired address. Sometimes, we knew ahead, but we didn't know what the subject was going to be. And it would be like, okay, you're going to have 5 minutes to speak on forgiveness.
Yeah.
And it's like 1, 2, 3, and the words start coming out, and you're like, afterwards, somebody's recording it, and then you're afterwards like, I don't know where some of that came from. It's like less of me, more of
Yeah.
thee. So I like this method that you've got.
I'm not religious. I'm not a Bible thumper, but I love some of the words in the Bible. And one of them is, I must decrease so you can increase.
Oh, yeah.
And for
Yeah.
me, that's mediumship. If I call, when I let spirit speak, I call that clairvacance. I had a kind of rude teacher who would refer to a medium who didn't know what she was talking about as clairvacance. She's using her clairvacance.
That's cute. But we get the idea. It's discernment.
Yeah. But I get out of the way. That's all it is.
And how does this help heal grief?
The process of hearing a loved one speak through a medium, or the process of doing it yourself, or just in general?
Well, why don't we look at doing it yourself? Because I feel like this is a way to empower people,
I
is
think,
right. And it's really what you're all about, is empowerment, automatic writing, just making your own connection in general. I've seen miracles happen, and I've seen people get even more sad in the very beginning, but everybody's grief is different. So everybody's process is different. What have you seen?
well, I had a reading today, and I brought through a son, and the mom was in tears, sad, and I told her, sometimes really feeling your son's presence is gonna make you sad. It's like when somebody comes to visit you, and you know they're going to leave for the airport tomorrow. But today I know that David could leave for the airport, but he's going to be there. I was at a ceremony yesterday. I love woo-woo because there's no limits, So I stepped up for Olympia ceremony, mine, and the music changed from what the healer had programmed into a song called Sweet Oranges in Spanish. I have been eating tons of oranges lately, and it was real light and funny and happy. And the healer said, David did that. I have no idea. I've never heard that song before.
Oh, yeah, that was cool. Well done, David.
So the sadness makes sense at first because they're here and that means they're going to leave like they left before. How sad is that? But after they come and go and come and go and come and go, it's easier to know, oh, okay, I'm not going to hug him today, maybe. I'm not going to feed him. I miss that. That's devastating. But my relationship with David was not just a physical relationship. And everything but the physical part is still very present.
How do we recognize clairvacance and what do we do? And I love that term, by the way. This is Milliganese clairvacance.
Well, sometimes I'll tell people, imagine putting your hand in a bowl of water, right? And when you lift your hand out, what happens to the bowl of water? It fills in the space where your hand was. And when I get out of the way, when I pull my consciousness away from that mom or that dad or that sister, spirit likes to fill up empty spaces.
I'm with you. And is some of this what people call mindfulness?
I'm not sure. Mindfulness brings to my mind, my conscious mind. And I've learned in meditation that the whole purpose for me is my conscious mind needs to be servant, not master.
I like that. I like that a lot. When I first heard the term mindful, I thought, oh my gosh, my mind is already so full. But the mindfulness or being in the present moment is part of a process of your preparation for connecting, but then it's also just a surrender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lady named Ann Albers who talks about the what's next exercise.
I've known her for probably almost 20 years.
Isn't she amazing?
Yes, the angel lady, Angel Ann, I call her.
I met her a couple months after David passed, and I was so scared. Oh, angels. And just the whole thing was just outlandish. But she had us focus. What's in the room? What did you not notice? Look for something beautiful. Look again and be a child. No names, no judgments, no labels. Now ask out loud, what's next? And I learned that when I'm really present, I can't be in my head at the same time. Who knew? I didn't know. It took me 62 years.
I know what I think, but I've got to ask the question. Would you call your son in spirit your spirit guide?
Not, I would call him one of my spirit guides. I'm sure you've noticed that more and more and more of the channelers that are around today are not channeling with Fred or Mary Ellis or Josephine. They're channeling the guides, or they're channeling a group or a collective. They're channeling universal wisdom. And
I like that. I like that, we're not chasing a celebrity. Where are you? Why did you die when you died? And this sensationalism. I want the wisdom.
yeah. But you introduced me to Harry Edwards. I got a reading from you 4 years ago, maybe, and you said, Harry Edwards is standing right there. He might want to work with you. And I write to him all the time. I talk to him. He helps me in healing. I read one of his books, A Guide to Spirit Healing, and my dog I would call him over. He would jump with his front paws on my bed. I would hold him. I would attune to spirit. I would send him healing. And the dog still comes to the side of my bed for more Harry Edwards style healing. But I just realized last week I work with Chi, Supreme Healing Energy, but Harry is part of that. So I work with she and he, Harry Edwards.
And Harry transitioned, I just looked it up in
76.
1976. Oh, yeah, yeah. And there, I believe he still has a healing center
Yes.
dedicated to him where people practice the healing that he did. It's so powerful.
It's a beautiful spot. I went there in 2022 and I got a healing there. And then I walked out in the garden. It was very early May, so bluebell forest season. I walked around, I sat on a bench, and he walked right up to me and stood in front of me. I have no idea for how long. I have no idea what he said or did. And then I recognized he wasn't there anymore. And it was the highlight of my trip.
Oh, you went there. Oh, that is so cool. Well, let's see, what's the book? Life in is it Life in Spirit or Life in Spirit World?
The one I've read a lot of his, but the one I read was A Guide to Spiritual Healing, I think.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and I know someone that had a healing with him. And I was on my way to her house in Manhattan, and the current president at that time in 2012 was in town, and nobody could get a taxi, and I just needed a taxi. And there was a man, I didn't know who Harry Edwards was at that time, but it sure looked like him. And he pulled up and in his British accent says, "Where are you going?" And I told him, he said, "We'll share a taxi." I get to my friend's house and it's actually author Sherry Pearl.
Oh,
And
wow, yeah.
yeah, right. And I walk in and she has a picture in her foyer of Harry. And I said, "I just saw that man. I just saw it, his twin." And I said, "Who is he? He just helped me by sharing a taxi with me." And she said, "That's the man that basically changed my life and healed me. And I'm alive because of him. It's Harry Edwards." So then I got into Harry Edwards, and I'm like, to this day, I felt like, he helped me get to his friends. He was making sure that the two of us got together because I'd never been to her place before.
Wow.
And yeah, and then after that, I think I'm pretty sure because I would have written this down. You're the only session that I've had, or any person I've been around outside of Sherry Pearl where Harry has popped in. So people would say, "Well, what is he now to her?" And he's like, there are
I love
spirit
him.
guides. Yeah, well, there are spirit guides that come and go as needed, and great teachers that, they're still healing from the other side. They're still working the other side. I think it's really neat that you went there. Did you have any above the norm experiences when you were over there in the UK or at the healing center?
Almost every day. When I was getting packed, I have a shirt of David's, and it's ripped out at the elbow. And I'm packing, and David says, "Ma, bring my shirt." "No, I'm not bringing your shirt." We argue like that. I've got all this stuff to bring. I can't fit. And he was quiet. And then he said, it's the best chance I got of having something physical come to England and Ireland. He was half Irish, more than half Irish. So I did, and he showed up almost every day. Harry Edwards showed up, just a whole bunch of amazing things. At one point, we were standing on a tour, a sacred sites tour with John Holland. We're standing in a clearing, 100 trees around. I look up and David's in that tree right there in the top limb, just grinning at me.
Nice.
And I'm watching, and this lady next to me, Lisa, I didn't even know her. She taps me on the shoulder. She says, "Your son wants me to take your picture in that tree." And she points to the tree David was in.
Oh, okay. So I got the goosebumps on that one.
So he was just there all the time, and
So he was there all the time. It's, you know, people sometimes think that if they change where they live, if they sell their house and move, they'll lose some form of connection. If they travel abroad, they'll be far away from their loved one. I mean, they're mobile. We know that. Do you? I know that you're writing again. Where do you take your inspiration to write another book? I mean, are you going to go into trance writing this book, or how is this one coming and what's it about?
I hope I go into trance, because when I do, whatever comes is way better than anything I could come up with. I don't know what this one is about. I just found out that self-help books are not big sellers today.
Really?
Well, I don't know. I talked to one person who won't like hearing that. But anyway,
Well, I think that there's an audience for anything that is helpful, hopeful, and healing. How big of that audience depends. And I've even had messages sometimes in a reading, and the soul's giving really good evidence. We know that it's them. And then it's like, we've done the identification, we've done the evidence, we come to the message. Here's the message, that I know that you're writing a book, and you're like, oh my God, nobody knows that. And the message a lot of times is, it'll be better known posthumously. So it's like,
oh, bummer.
I know. So you mean, you know, look, hey, however we reach people is good, you know. And speaking of reaching people, how exactly do people work with you? I mean, getting the book is a great example, but how are you mentioned readings.
I love one-on-ones. I love virtual DEMs, but I think my new favorite is physical live DEMs. I did my first for other than a small group last Saturday.
And DEMS means demonstrations for Mama, in case Mama is listening. Demonstration, DEM.
Yeah, so it was a 4-hour event. We did Reiki, we did healing, we hooked people up with the person next to them and had them heal each other. And then we had a demonstration at the end, and just an example. I do not particularly I hate name, rank, and serial number. Sorry, Janet. One example, I know this is your mom, and I'm feeling like I have an impressive chest. And the woman starts laughing, and she says, yeah, she always used to talk about her over the shoulder boulder holder. That's the kind of evidence I like.
Yeah, I that's when the personality comes through like that, that is super, super healing as well. So let's say I'm listening to you. I'm like, I have a really close loved one in spirit. I'd like to continue this relationship. I'm going to go buy a brand new fresh notebook, buy something really, you know, elegant or whatever. I'm going to buy a special pen. I'm going to dedicate it to these sessions. When is a good time to start? Like, where do you need to be?
Hey, now.
Yes, but where do you need to be in the grief process, Claudia? I mean,
Okay, it's helpful to have it start after the passing, unless it's not a passing kind of grief. Other than that, people say, oh, wait a year before you get a reading. Okay, until I don't need one as much. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, that's hard. That's hard because really the reading is to confirm I'm here, I still live, I'm still part of your life, it's real, and then you start learning how to direct connect.
David started talking to me 4 days after he passed, and that's to a bean counter.
Yeah, when you say bean counter and you talk about your analytical side, I think that's really helpful for people to hear. I was speaking to a physician the other day, and she was saying, I'm a scientist. I can't just look at a patient and intuit what's going on, but it's happening. And then I'm like, yeah, but you do the requisite science anyway. It doesn't influence the work that you're doing. And she's like, but I'm so uncomfortable. So
I
what about being uncomfortable with this, or this is just too out there? What do you say?
I learned that I couldn't ever grow, I couldn't ever change, I couldn't ever do anything new if I wasn't willing to be uncomfortable. I learned I've been trying to recover from a multitude of weird life circumstances. And I just learned that if I did what came natural, if I did what I was comfortable with doing, I was going to get what I always got. And it hadn't worked for me.
I don't know if this is putting you on the spot. I think I'll do it anyway. Because you're fun, you're really, you're cool. You're one of the cool kids. Is there anything that David would want to say to people listening?
Oh. But he started out with, I love you, Mom, but that's not, I appreciate that. It's just all okay. You got to understand it's all okay. It doesn't have to feel okay to be okay, but it's okay. Geez, have fun. You can have so much fun here if you just forget the nonsense. Just have fun. You're awesome.
Oh, that's cool. We need to hear that right now. It's kind of an on edge time in many societies, and just have fun is really important. And I just had another podcast I was on with a study group, and someone came on and said, we have to have more fun. We have to find more joy and, tune out the other stuff. You can't be in like the real world constantly. I also noticed in looking at you, because obviously we're recording this on Zoom, your aura changed colors. I wouldn't say it was one specific color, but there was a big like blast of like a fuchsia pink.
Oh, nice. Heart
Yeah,
chakra.
heart chakra, very, very pretty. And then like for me, the whole screen went white when you did that. And there was an outline of a funnel over your head. And for golly, at least 30 years, if not longer, if I see a funnel over somebody's head, that's a channel. So
How cool. Thank
yeah.
you.
And that was very sweet. And then finally, I want to, I ask you how people can get in touch with you, and of course on YouTube, your website's plastered on here. Could you tell the story of the teddy bear that's in the chair
Of
behind
course.
you?
Yeah. I want everybody to meet Eustace. A friend of mine, Karen, gave Eustace to me to have something to hold shortly after David passed. And I held him in my hands. I just for a second, and Eustace came up. And Eustace is the name of the problem child in Chronicles of Narnia. But I loved the name, so I used it. And I found out later that Eustace means stable or something like that. And this Eustace is weighted, his bottom is weighted so he doesn't fall over. So he is stable. And I I don't know if it was David or if it was Eustace. I'm starting to write to fictional characters. I'm writing to plants. Because why not?
Because it's all connected, and you're coming up with a name that actually means stable, that being a stable teddy bear that can't fall off the chair when a breeze hits it. And your connection with your son, beautiful David in spirit, is stable. Is a testimony to the beauty of life and the life after this. How do people get in contact with you? Tell us now.
Okay, well, first of all, my website is www.healingfromhome.com. I called it that because it's not talking to heaven. It's not, they're here, they're right here. They may be at home in spirit, but they're here. It's healing-from-home. It'll be in the notes. I love to do online DEMs, virtual DEMs. I'm doing one probably before this airs. But I'm around, and I love talking to spirit. I love teaching moms. I worked with a mom recently. I did a reading for her, and I just said, just try it right now. Talk to him. And she started talking to her son. I said, now say, hi, Mom, and say out loud what he says. And she talked 2 paragraphs worth of message from her kid. It's bliss. It's bliss here, Mom. It's pure bliss. And I just cried.
This is the hopeful results. This is what people need to hear. Ah, Claudia Milligan, thank you.
Thank you, Susanne. I love you. You're awesome.
I love you.
Thank you.
Visit our website, carefreemedium.com, or find us on social media @carefreemedium. Thanks for supporting Carefree and Conscious.